The various incantations and sorceries of the lands between stem from the different faiths and studies of those who reside beneath the Erd Tree. Many incantations rely on faith in the Golden Order, or the primordial power of dragons, and the sorcery we can wield can only be done so through the study of glintstone and the intelligence to understand the amber of the cosmos. For every form of magic we can wield, there's an associated explanation as to why or how we can wield it. So what about the magic we experience that we can't truly wield for ourselves? Deep below the lands between, we can find a tribe that utilizes their own form of magic, better described as spiritual arts, that we can never truly learn for ourselves. Sure, we can utilize it through the help of arrows and a special item, but we cannot cast these abilities in the same way their originators can. The Ancestral Followers and their Shamans wield a unique form of magic otherwise unseen in the lands between, and while some of their people may reside on the surface, those below have access to the heart of their magic, and will use it against us, should we be perceived as a threat to them or their people. Thank you for joining us for this latest episode in our ongoing Elden Ring lore series. If this is your first time finding the channel, welcome. We're happy you've decided to spend some time with us exploring the lore of Elden Ring. With over 100 episodes to our name, we hope you can find the answers to any questions you have about the lands between and its inhabitants. If not, let us know in the comments and we'll see what we can find. Today's video has actually been requested numerous times over the last year, and we're finally digging in. Don't forget to check out our Discord if you want to engage with our ever-growing community of FromSoft fans as we gear up for Shadow of the Erd Tree this June. If you end up enjoying this video, please consider subscribing to the channel. It goes a long way in helping us stay relevant on YouTube, and we want to continue bringing you these lore dives for as long as you'll have us. With that said, let's get back to the story at hand. As a kind of disclaimer before diving into the Ancestral Followers, Hawkshaw has an amazing dissection of these enemies, as well as his interpretations of their origins, and I highly suggest checking out both of his videos after you've finished ours. I'm going to be doing my best not to regurgitate info he's already covered, as I do have a differing opinion on how long they've existed in their current state, and in our usual fashion, this lore dive will try to keep the story easily digestible. The Ancestral Followers can be found primarily underground when exploring the lands between. They cut an imposing presence. Their build is taller and stockier compared to most other humanoid creatures we encounter, while their heads seem to be too small for their bodies. They wield rustic weaponry and adorn themselves with furs and horns, living what seems to be a more naturalistic lifestyle deep below the ground. Their belief system stands in stark contrast to the Golden Order, as the shaman furs and raiments tell us. The Ancestral Followers live a distance from the Erd Tree, awaiting new buds. They're certain to sprout from their very flesh, and indeed, their souls. These buds that their clothes refer to are actually horns, such as those you'd find on creatures touched by the Crucible. In fact, it seems as though the main subject of their worship is actually the cycle of life and death itself. The Ancestral Spirit horn tells us it is an item cut from the horns of the regal Ancestor Spirit. A number of new growths bud from the antler-like horns of the fallen king, each glowing with light. Thus does new life grow from death, and from death, one obtains power. These people worship the cycle of life and death, same as those under the shade of the Erd Tree. However, their form of power in death is tied to something even more ancient than the golden light of grace. The Ancestral Followers have two distinct roles to play that seem to be cut along gender lines. The men of these tribes are often seen traveling in groups, followed by animals, patrolling the land they call home, while the women act as shamans, holding the skulls of ancestral infants and communing with them through song and a form of dance. We can obtain one of these ancestral infant heads for ourselves, and the description tells us it is a skull of a very young ancestral spirit. Just think how many sproutings it might bear. Used to spray spirit vapor, inflicting magic damage. The vapor becomes a temporary geyser, which deals continuous damage to everything it touches until it disappears. With this in mind, it looks as if the Ancestral Follower Shamans are attempting a sort of ritual in order to have the skull sprout new horns, or perhaps to sprout horns for themselves. While the Ancestral Followers believe deeply that they too will someday sprout horns, it doesn't seem like any of them have up to this point. It'd be easy to be fooled into thinking they have horns coming from their heads when looking at them, but we're able to take these horns for ourselves, and we learn they're nothing more than headbands. The Great Horned Headband is exactly what it sounds like, and the Shining Horn Headband is described as a headband decorated by a pair of shining horns, worn by Ancestral Follower Shamans. Horns with buds that also shine are ideal ceremonial items for ancient worship. Strengthens Ancestral Infant's head. It looks like these followers and shamans have no horns of their own, and this, among other things, has led to the idea that these tribes are not as ancient as they appear, and may have been surface dwellers, who found their way below in order to follow their naturalistic lifestyle. But I don't subscribe to this theory. There are a couple of groups of ancestral followers that can be found on the surface of the lands between, around the Erdtree of the lakes, and if we follow their path, we come to a minor Erdtree and an Erdtree avatar. These followers stand behind the avatar, conducting the same dance we see their shamans perform, as a way of strengthening the ancestral infant skulls. There are a couple of things I find fascinating about this. Firstly, that the area leading up to this minor Erdtree is littered with statues that can be found below ground, meaning this place is likely a remnant of before the ancient cities were banished, or rather, sunk underground. Second, this dance is reserved for worshipping sprouting buds, which would one day become horns, and we know that the ancestral followers live away from the Erdtree in hope of sprouting buds. With this in mind, I believe this group of followers has mistaken the Erdtree avatar as a creation of the Crucible. As they have no shamans above ground in Liurnia to steer their worship in the right direction, it's possible they're simply misunderstanding the beast that stands in front of them. There's also an ancestral follower and a shaman in the consecrated snowfield, guarding a corpse holding a stalwart horn charm. If I had to guess, I'd say these two were here on a pilgrimage to find Miquella's Haligtree, where all are welcome. Or they were watching over the horn charm, as its description tells us. The ancestral followers believe that the horns of a long-lived beast continue to bud like antlers, over and over again, until the beast one day becomes an ancestral spirit. Ultimately, I believe that before the fall of the eternal cities below ground, the ancestral followers and shamans existed on the surface, and the ones found below ground are direct descendants of those original tribes. In my mind, nothing else explains their distinct physicality, as they're not touched by the Crucible, nor are they omen, so their large muscular bodies are natural, and not due to having interacted with the Crucible. In fact, these tribes seem to act against those who do not sprout horns. The weapons of the ancestral followers are distinct in that they are all made from horns, save for the jawbone axe. Axe made from an herbivore skull. Weapon of the ancestral followers who disdain metal. This axe is more of a bludgeon. It forgoes a bladed edge, instead using the beast's molar teeth to buffet foes, dealing strike damage. Two interesting notes about this weapon. First, it's made specifically from herbivore skulls, and the item, budding horn, tells us it is a rarely seen specimen of a young budding horn, found by hunting herbivorous beasts. This horn began to sprout on a beast that typically bears no horn. Perhaps it's a vestige of the primordial crucible. So these weapons are made from those who sprout horns, even if it doesn't utilize horns itself. Second, it tells us the ancestral followers disdain metal. Perhaps this is merely a sign of their more naturalistic lifestyle, but it could also be alluding to metal's place in obstructing the balance of life and death. Silver tears, after all, are man-made beings of metal that live outside the rules of the Erdtree and the Crucible. Some of the other weapons the followers wield are the horn bow, a longbow made from animal horn, which reveals its true worth when used with magic-infused arrows. And we know the dwelling arrows contain the spirits of small animals, another use for the spirits of the dead. There's also the Great Horn Hammer, which is a huge, thick horn carved with tree ring-like markings adapted into a bludgeoning weapon. The ancient horn is imbued with the power of ancestral spirits, and the winged great horn is a distinctive horn suffused with the power of ancestral spirits. This large wing-shaped specimen is wielded as a weapon of spirit worship. In the ancestral spirit worshipping faith, these are considered envoys' wings, made to reap the lives of beings which experience no sprouting. All of these weapons serve to deepen the connection between the ancestral followers and their belief in the power of horns and their connection to life and death. While we've touched on the idea that the ancestral followers spurn metal, the ancestral follower ashes tell us that they have also moved away from the use of letters. A spirit of the horned folk who eschew letters and metalworking. Brawny and versed in distinctive spiritual arts, this particular tribesman wields a heavy bow. We can actually see how these followers have moved away from lettering while lighting the flame pillars in Nokrin. With each pillar we light, we can see glowing runes in the same color as the ancestral shaman's magic, and through the power of these pillars, we can awaken the closest things to gods that the ancestral followers and shamans have, the ancestral spirits. The ancestral spirits are incredibly mysterious, as they can only be summoned by lighting the flaming pillars around the Siofra riverbank and Nokrin the Eternal City. By lighting these pillars, we can approach the remains of these ancient, deer-like creatures and enter an arena where we can do battle with them. The standard ancestral spirit is a straightforward fight. This large enemy can chase us around the arena, dealing damage with its massive glowing horns, or utilizing the same blue magic that pours from the ancestral infant skull. The more interesting battle is with the regal ancestor spirit. The regal ancestor spirit is significantly more aggressive and has access to abilities the regular ancestor spirit does not. The regal variation of this enemy puts into practice the many ideas we learn while researching the ancestral followers and shamans. The arena in which we face it has the spirits of animals wandering around, and if it takes enough damage, it has the ability to essentially collapse its physical form, dying in the process and reconstituting itself into new life by taking the place of another animal spirit. It can also drain the animal spirits around it in order to heal itself, creating life from death, in a way not all too dissimilar from the Erdtree itself. Also worth noting is that the regal ancestor spirit can prance through the air, jumping while airborne, in a way strongly reminiscent of our trusty steed, Torrent, meaning Torrent himself could be some form of ancestor spirit. Interestingly, the regal ancestor spirit drops a remembrance we can take to finger reader Enya. Remembrance of the regal ancestor spirit hewn into the Erdtree. Ancestral spirits exist as a phenomenon beyond the purview of the Erdtree. Life sprouts from death as it does from birth. Such is the way of the living. This implies that should we kill the ancestor spirits, they too return to the Erdtree somehow. The greater implication of this, I'm not too sure of. In the end, these creatures are a culmination of the beliefs of the ancestral followers. They die to be born again through the ritual of lighting the flame pillars, and they can create life from death utilizing nature itself. This is all we know of the ancestral followers, the shamans, and their beliefs. While we can craft a strong understanding of who they are and what they believe, there are still questions yet unanswered. Where do they originally hail from exactly? Are they the ones who hid the remains of the ancestor spirits away from the Golden Order? Why did they seem to have cut off or lost their noses? Why don't the horns they so desperately want to grow on their bodies ever appear? There are no solid answers to these questions, but with what we do know, we can paint a picture of a spiritual people, living at one with nature, and taking the lessons it has to teach about life and death to heart. They protect the land and creatures around them, and keep those that would disturb this cycle at bay with ruthless precision. If you tread on their holy grounds, beware, or you may find yourself stuck through with their arrows, no matter where you try to hide. Thank you for joining us for our exploration of the ancestral followers, shamans, and their beliefs. Do you believe these tribes existed long before the Golden Order, or are they separatists who left for a more natural lifestyle? Why do you think their roles in their tribes are cut down gender lines? Are the Ancestor Spirits the original inhabitants of the lands between? Let us know your thoughts and theories in the comments below. I also want to take a second to shout out Zuli the Witch, who explored cut content around these enemies, as there used to be a variation of them that had succumbed to rot, so feel free to check out their findings as well. Don't forget to like, subscribe, hit the bell, and set notifications to all so you never miss out on any of our lore dives. We look forward to seeing you again for more Elden Lore.